The young men sat in the back of a military truck, their faces tired, uniforms caked in mud. Then the canvas flap was lifted, and Dick Winters froze. The color drained from his face. Without a word, he turned, got into a car, and left, never to return to the set of the miniseries based on his own life. That moment wasn't staged. It wasn't scripted. It was real. Winters, the real-life commander of Easy Company during World War II, said later that when he looked at those actors in costume, he didn't see performers. He saw ghosts, the faces of the men he had served with, many of whom never came home. And that, in a single moment, captures the haunting authenticity and emotional weight of HBO's Band of Brothers, a series that didn't just tell a story about war, it honored a generation. We're going behind the scenes of one of the most iconic war dramas ever made, revealing the staggering budget, grueling training, jaw-dropping production secrets, and the untold stories that will forever change the way you watch it. 1. The most expensive miniseries ever at the time. In 2001, television had never seen anything like Band of Brothers. With a budget of $125 million, or about $12.5 million per episode, it became the most expensive miniseries ever produced. And that's before HBO threw in an extra $15 million for marketing, bringing the total to a jaw-dropping $140 million. For comparison, the previous record holder, 1983's The Winds of War, cost just $35 million, around $67 million adjusted for inflation. That means Band of Brothers nearly doubled it. Why so costly? 2,000 authentic military uniforms, 1,200 vintage civilian costumes, over 10,000 extras, hundreds of period-accurate weapons, up to 14,000 rounds of ammunition per day, 6 tanks built from scratch and 4 more rented. Explosives? Try 700 pounds per episode, with the first 3 episodes alone using more pyrotechnics than Saving Private Ryan. It was a production where historical accuracy wasn't a guideline. It was a mission. 2. Bootcamp from Hell. If you're going to spend $125 million telling the story of Easy Company, your actors had better look like soldiers. Enter Captain Dale Dye, decorated Marine, Vietnam veteran, military advisor, and a man who doesn't do Hollywood easy. He put the cast through a brutal 10-day boot camp at the British Army's Longmoor Camp. Days began at 5 a.m., ran for 18 hours, and included physical drills, tactical maneuvers, and even 1940s-style parachute training, complete with a 40-foot mock airplane jump. Some actors thrived. Michael Fassbender called it fun. His biggest worry was having to relieve himself in the woods. Others, not so much. Scott Grimes recalled grown men crying themselves to sleep on the first night. Richard Speight Jr. lay in bed thinking, "I'm never going, but that was the point." As Dye put it, when the director says, "You're exhausted," they'd know exactly what exhaustion means to a soldier. By the end, each actor earned his jump wings, and something far more valuable, a bond that felt real on screen because it was forged in sweat, mud, and shared misery. That bond wasn't just for the cameras. Actors who barely knew each other before filming were suddenly dependent on one another, just as real paratroopers were. Sleep deprivation was constant. They learned to march in formation, crawl through mud under barbed wire, and carry heavy packs for miles. Meals were sparse and unappealing, intentionally so, to simulate wartime rations. Even the smallest tasks, like polishing boots or cleaning rifles, became group responsibilities, reinforcing teamwork. Captain Dye was known for surprising the actors with real-world disruptions. In the middle of the night, he might order them out of their bunks for an impromptu drill. Sometimes it was a march in the cold rain. Other times it was a mock defensive perimeter where the cast had to react as if enemy forces were near. It wasn't meant to be fun. It was meant to make them think like soldiers, to move and react instinctively. Dye also stripped away the idea that movie sets were glamorous. "There's no craft services in combat," he famously quipped. Actors were given only basic field gear, no warm trailers, no makeup chairs. If it rained, they got wet. If it was cold, they shivered. The only warmth came from each other and the camaraderie they built. Ron Livingston, who played Captain Lewis Nixon, later joked that by the end of the 10 days, "I wasn't sure if I was still acting or if I'd actually been drafted." Michael Cudlitz remembered it differently. "I went in an actor and came out a soldier, at least in my head." That's exactly what Dai wanted. He wasn't trying to make the actors pretend to be paratroopers. He was trying to make them believe they were. And when the cameras finally rolled, that belief showed in every step, every shouted order, every moment of silent exhaustion. It's no wonder the brotherhood forged in those 10 days bled into the performances we see on screen. Because for the cast of Band of Brothers, Easy Company wasn't just a role. It was an experience they had lived together. 3. A British invasion. Here's the twist. Though Band of Brothers tells the story of an American unit, over half the speaking roles, and most of the extras were British. On the surface, it's surprising. The series is about the 101st Airborne Division, an iconic American fighting force. Yet behind the camera, the majority of the cast were UK natives who had never worn a US uniform in their lives. The reason? Simple, the series was filmed almost entirely in the United Kingdom, on an enormous 1,100-acre backlit in Hatfield, Hertfordshire. This wasn't just any backlit. It was a chameleon, a massive, ever-changing stage capable of transforming into 11 different European towns. One week it might be the Normandy countryside, complete with hedgerows and farmhouses. The next, it became the shell-shocked streets of Bastogne or the alpine beauty of Austria. Skilled set designers rebuilt storefronts, church steeples, and cobblestone roads again and again, while every window, doorway, and street sign was painstakingly altered to reflect the specific look of each region. Among the British actors who mastered flawless American accents were Damian Lewis as Major Richard Winters, Dexter Fletcher, Mark Warren, Simon Pegg, Tom Hardy, James McAvoy, and Shane Taylor. Many of these actors were relatively unknown at the time, and their convincing portrayals often fooled even American audiences into thinking they were homegrown talent. Casting so many British actors wasn't just about location, it was also a practical decision. By sourcing local performers, the production could tap into the UK's deep pool of classically trained stage actors, known for their ability to adapt to different dialects and mannerisms. And it wasn't just the speaking roles. Over 10,000 extras were hired from the area, populating battle scenes with thousands of American soldiers who were, in reality, from just down the road. The result? A level of authenticity and visual variety that would have been far more expensive and logistically difficult to achieve if the crew had traveled across Europe. Next time you watch Easy Company march through Europe, remember, they never left the same backlit. Every town, every battlefield, every victory and loss you see was built, fought, and filmed in the very same place. For Bastogne, indoors. The Bastogne episode is one of the coldest, most harrowing hours in Band of Brothers. You can almost feel the frostbite in your bones, the aching numbness, the bitter wind slicing through worn uniforms. The actors look like they're on the edge of collapse, shivering in a forest blanketed with ice and snow. But here's the kicker, none of it was real. The entire frozen forest was built inside a massive airplane hangar at Hatfield Aerodrome in England. Not a flake of snow fell from the sky. Not a single breath clouded in the winter air. The production team went all in to make the illusion work. They trucked in hundreds of real trees and combined them with 250 fiberglass ones that could be damaged and repositioned to mimic war-torn woods. The fiberglass trunks were often dressed with hemp and latex to simulate bark ripped away by artillery fire. Foam treetops were designed to fall dramatically after simulated shell blasts, their lightweight construction allowing them to drop safely but convincingly. For the snow, they used an astonishing third of 1,000,000 pounds of shredded paper, blended with plastics to create every possible type of winter texture, from delicate falling flakes to packed ice to the slushy mix that clings to boots. The crew spent 4 weeks painstakingly dressing the set, layering snow by hand to make it look natural. The indoor setting had its advantages: no risk of weather delays, total control over lighting, and the ability to reset scenes without waiting for the perfect winter conditions. But it also meant the actors had to fake the physical misery of freezing temperatures while working in a climate-controlled environment. That's why you rarely see the actor's breath. The air wasn't cold enough. Instead, they relied on body language, slowed movements, and visible tension to sell the idea of bone-deep cold. Watching the episode, you'd swear they were on the edge of frostbite. In reality, between takes, they could step aside and sip a cup of tea. Still, the illusion is so convincing that even some viewers who know the truth forget it's a set. Bastogne wasn't just a location, it was a masterclass in movie magic. 5. Future superstars in uniform. The cast list of Band of Brothers now reads like a who's who of Hollywood. There's Tom Hardy, long before Inception, Mad Max, Fury Road, and Venom, playing a young Private Janovec with that same magnetic screen presence he's now famous for. James McAvoy appears briefly but memorably as Private Miller, years before Atonement, X-Men, and Split made him an international star. Michael Fassbender was just another hungry young actor when he stepped into the boots of Technical Sergeant Burton Christensen, long before 12 Years a Slave and X-Men. First Class made him an award season regular. Then there's Simon Pegg, who at the time was only known in British comedy circles. A few years later, he'd be a blockbuster staple in Star Trek, Mission Impossible, and Shaun of the Dead. Damian Lewis, the British actor who became Major Richard Winters, was virtually unknown to American audiences. Today, thanks to Homeland and Billions, his name is instantly recognizable. And yes, even Jimmy Fallon, in the middle of his Saturday Night Live run, pops up as Lieutenant George Rice in one of the series' most surprising cameos. Others didn't become household names, but still built impressive careers. Michael Cudlitz went on to star in The Walking Dead and Southland. Jason O'Mara became a familiar face on American TV with roles in Terra Nova, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Vegas. Andrew Scott, now known worldwide as the Hot Priest from Fleabag and Moriarty from Sherlock, appears in the series as a paratrooper in the background. Colin Hanks, son of Tom Hanks, had one of his earliest roles here before moving on to films and series like Fargo. At the time, many of these actors were just starting out. Some had only a handful of credits to their name. But Band of Brothers was the kind of project every young actor dreamed of being part of. It wasn't just a job, it was a stamp of quality, a chance to work under the watchful eyes of Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, and an opportunity to share the screen with a massive ensemble cast in what would become one of the most respected war dramas of all time. For some, it was a stepping stone. For others, it was a launching pad. But for all of them, it was an experience they'd carry and proudly list for the rest of their careers. 6. Real guns, real history. The production didn't settle for cheap replicas or plastic props. If Band of Brothers was going to put weapons in the hands of its actors, they were going to be the real deal. In total, the team acquired 700 genuine World War II-era firearms. These included the legendary M1 Garand, the rifle General Patton once called the greatest battle implement ever devised. It was standard issue for U.S. paratroopers and became one of the most iconic weapons of the war. They also stocked up on M1 carbines, lighter and more compact for close quarters fighting, and Springfield 1903 rifles, a mainstay in earlier years of the conflict. But the attention to detail didn't stop with the American arsenal. The production also sourced authentic German weaponry, including Mauser K98K bolt-action rifles, the infamous MP40 submachine gun, and the instantly recognizable Luger pistol. Many of these weapons were collector's items, lovingly preserved and still in working order, their history etched into every nick and scratch on the metal. For scenes where firing wasn't necessary, the crew used 400 highly detailed rubber prop guns. These weren't the flimsy toy-like props you sometimes see in lower-budget productions. They were designed to look so real that, in a holster or slung over a shoulder, you'd never know the difference. This was crucial for safety during chaotic battle scenes involving dozens of actors and extras moving at once. To put the value into perspective, a single M1 Garand in good condition can fetch anywhere from $1,500 to over $5,000 today, depending on its originality and condition. That means the M1 Garands alone could be worth millions. Using authentic weapons wasn't just about accuracy. It was about the way they felt in the actor's hands. Real rifles have weight, a balance, and a kick when fired that no replica can truly mimic. That heft changes the way an actor moves, the way they shoulder their weapon, even the way they react under simulated fire. It's a subtle detail, but it's part of what gave Band of Brothers its unmistakable sense of realism. On screen, it's easy to forget these were props in a TV production. In the moment, for the actors and the audience alike, they were tools of survival in a world at war. 7. The Cry of Currahee. In the series, Easy Company's rallying cry, Currahee, comes from the mountain they trained on at Camp Toccoa. What you don't hear in the show is the deeper meaning. Currahee is Cherokee for "We Stand Alone." It perfectly symbolized the paratrooper's spirit, isolated, self-reliant, and unbreakable. 8. Dick Winters' Ghosts. We come back to that haunting scene. Winters had supported the project, even calling author Stephen Ambrose the leading historian of our time. But when he saw those young men in uniform, laughing and waiting for their scene, it was too much. To him, they weren't actors. They were the men he had led and lost. He left without a goodbye, a silent salute to ghosts only he could see. 9. More authentic. At the premiere, Tom Hanks asked Winters what he thought. Winters' reply? "I was hoping for an 80% solution." Hanks smiled. "Major, this is Hollywood. We'll be hailed as geniuses if we get 12% right. We're shooting for 17%. Winters eventually came around, praising the realism of the battle scenes and the decision to include real Easy Company veterans in the series. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to cement their legacy. 10. The legacy. Band of Brothers went on to win 6 Emmys and a Golden Globe. More importantly, it kept the memory of Easy Company alive for a new generation. Even today, more than 2 decades later, it remains the gold standard of World War II storytelling, a blend of authenticity, emotion, and cinematic power that few have matched. And maybe that's why Winters' moment on set resonates so deeply, because in that instant, we see that Band of Brothers wasn't just a show. It was a bridge between the living and the dead, a reminder that history is made of real people, whose echoes still answer the call. Currahee.